I would love to take this opportunity to welcome you all to season 2. Wanderers, welcome back. We handle the delicate topic of alcoholism, addiction, sobriety, and the journeys that come with it. So you all give a warm Wanderers welcome to Muthoni.
I'm a Gen X. I even as someone who's like a millennial, like a late millennial, maybe we can sort of understand each other. But early stages of millennialism, we don't, right?
Yeah. So let's walk back a little bit and talk about how alcohol use impacts the grieving process. It helps, yes. Mm-hmm. It does help temporarily. But then how does it impact the process from actually getting to the point of healing and acceptance, which might be a bit of a yo-yo, right? Mm-hmm. There's that going back and forth between anger, bargaining, all of those different emotions. But how does alcohol impact the grieving process? Slowing it down, at least I feel like it slows it down to getting to that point of, and for me, acceptance doesn't mean it doesn't hurt anymore. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means I have accepted that this is done and I've made peace with it, as opposed to trying to hold on or, going through all of the emotions of what if this, what if that, what if, and all of that. How do you feel that alcohol, misuse of alcohol, I'm not talking about the people who drink one glass of wine. I'm talking about the folks who, like me, used to drink a whole whiskey bottle after a six-pack of keg and a whole bottle of red wine in a span of like 4 or 5 hours.
I think what alcohol does, it just blocks the natural process of grief, right? And I think you mentioned you kind of get stuck, right?
Yep. You
kind of get stuck. And so what is a natural ebb and flow, right? Kind of, it's like you can't statue.
Yeah. Freeze, stop.
You can't statue. So you're like right there. And you're like right there.
And you can't really move,
You can't
right?
really move, right? It literally just stunts you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's something I want to say because, when people talk about acceptance, it's always like, okay, I can accept, I think I'm okay. But I think what it does, I think what acceptance is, it gives us a little bit more tools to engage with grief, right?
Yes.
So when grief comes knocking unexpectedly, because grief is very rude.
It is. It doesn't really knock, technically. It just kind of knocks you off your feet.
Shows up. Yep. What kind of emotion is that? It just shows up. Hi, nimekuja.
Almost at the worst times, by the way. Just when you feel like, I'm okay, I'm feeling better, and it comes and it's like, no, I'm not done with you yet.
Yeah, grief is very rude, right? Yeah. So when grief shows up unexpectedly, as opposed to running and hiding, and saying, I didn't feel. I think what allows us, if we engage with grief, is the ability to sit with it and ask grief, I have seen you've come.
And that is uncomfortable. Yo, that is uncomfortable. Just sitting there and you're like,
mekuja.
So this is what we're doing today. All right.
This is what
Let's talk.
Right. Yeah. So it's that awareness. And then you're like, okay, now that you're here, would you like some tea? I know that it's not literally tea. It's the engagement with the emotional state, right? So you're not running, and you're not avoiding. You're engaging, and I think grief, if we have the right external structures, will allow us to understand this idea. Is that grief allows us to go into the depths of ourselves and our human experience and trust that we're not going to drown.
When it feels like your head is barely above water, I think like that sensation is almost too familiar, where you're like, I don't want to figure out whether I'll stay afloat. I think I just want to keep drinking because I know I'm already drowning. right? And I think I think it's important to acknowledge how hard it is to kind of sit in that discomfort, in that having a conversation with grief, in that realization that I actually need to face this and not, I don't need to run away. I could, but and being intentional about it.
And it's okay to want to run away for a little bit. I think.
I know. And that's why I say it's so important to have these conversations.
Yeah.
Because we don't want people thinking that running, there's something bad about it. And that's why I want to not emphasize really, but be very intentional about saying it's hard. It's okay to run away. And sometimes if you can't cope, it's okay to run away.
Yes.
Don't beat yourself up when you run away a couple of times until you get to the point where you're like, okay, all right, you're here now. Let's talk.
Fine.
I can't run away from you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think so. And so when you now decide that maybe right now I don't need to use alcohol as a clutch. I think I am kind of ready, but not really ready, but I'm kind of ready to sit with this. Then you can then be able to engage with it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect segue to the next question, which would be coping suggestions. When we think about coping mechanisms, when you get to that, when that day comes, when that wave sweeps you off your feet and you want to stay in bed, curled up like a fetus again, crying your heart out because it feels like you're drowning in all these emotions that come with grief. What coping mechanisms can people delve into or look into?
I was gonna say I will just stay in bed, but
This that. Hey, I do it all the time. Okay, not all the time. Some of the time.
Yeah,
Still have day jobs, but yes.
But yeah, just stay in bed.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to anyone. I think we underestimate the importance of community.
We do.
Yeah, I think we underestimate the gift that community brings to us. Because you see, the question that you asked predisposes us to look at grief as an individual journey. It's not. It's a collective journey, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Think about how our culture of alcohol is. It's usually around people, right?
It is. A lot of it is around people.
Right? Even if you're gonna buy something and drink at home, right? You still have to engage with someone. Maybe you going to buy it or getting a rider to bring it to you, right?
Yeah.
And so when you talked about grief, I think what is imperative for us is to really think about what does it take to create a beloved community. Because I think that will be the antidote to a lot of collective and individual aches.
But I find that, like, even where we all grew up, where we both grew up, Mombasa, Nairobi, there was a time where we had a sense of community, where you knew your neighbors, when you interacted. But we've slowly, and I think this is not just a Kenyan thing, it's also globally, we've slowly narrowed, even the most societal the most communal of societies have sort of shrunk into the spaces where it's me, myself, and I, or me, myself, and mine. And when I say mine, it's the immediate nuclear family. So when I say mine, I mean my husband or my wife, myself, and my kids. There's not really much space for bigger than that. Some people are lucky to have maybe a church community or a work community, but you also see people are like, oh, don't tell people all your stories because they'll juju you or whatever. Or, people will wish you ill, somebody will throw you bad luck or whatever we call it. So how do we, as individuals, because I think when we talk about the bigger community, there's a lot of factors out of our individual control, but like me, as I am, or as you, how do you build a community around yourself? How do you try your best? Because it's not all up to you, but how do you try to create a community around you that you can sort of depend on, that you can call upon in these times?
What comes to mind is AA. That's what comes to mind when we talk about community. I'm thinking about AA, really.
Okay.
Because if you look at the tenets of AA, it's non-judgment, it's community,
It is.
it's support, right?
Yes.
And what I like about AA is, for the most part, and I don't know if this is not specific to different countries, but I know in our context in Kenya, there are AA chapters. Yeah. So I think that would be the community I'm speaking of, right?
Here's the funny thing, when you mentioned community, AA was the farthest thing on my mind.
Really?
I didn't think about Alcoholics Anonymous as a community. And I think for me, there's a particular reason. I refuse to lean on AA. And I've said it in a previous episode, don't make that mistake like I did to try and do it by yourself. Because I felt like I was too proud. I did not want to go to a place where I could stand up and tell people, yeah, I'm an addict. Right? My pride was so much like, I don't want to go out and put my bad side. I want the world to see my good side. And I've said it before, if you have an AA chapter near where you are, please lean on those resources, because it's such a huge part of the healing journey. And don't do it like me, because it just gets so much harder, but it's so fascinating. I didn't think about AA at all. When you're talking about community, really? I was thinking mom, dad, sister. I was thinking like immediate family. I was not thinking about AA.
No, I mean, oh my God, our families can be. Oh no, I was about to curse. They can be really judgmental. What? Like
they
yes?
can.
Yeah. So why would you know what I mean?
I
this is what I like about AA. Obviously, there are parts. This maybe I might differ in terms of their modalities, right? Because they really lean on supporting AA folks to shift behavior, right? Cognitive, a lot of like cognitive behavioral therapy stuff, right? But that doesn't address things like, the impact of trauma, all that stuff, right? But in terms of community, that's a really great resource to have.
It is.
It is, because they all know this is not like
everyone's been there.
Brand new. Yeah. Nobody's brand new. And there's no judgment. None.
That is true. Now you have my wheel spinning, because I'm like, I did not think about AA as a community of support. I did not think of that being a place where you can call somebody from the community to be like, I don't want to get out of bed today. I am tempted to drink. Because if you're also on that sobriety journey, times like that of where you're overwhelmed by emotion is a trigger, because you're kind of like, I don't want to deal with this right now. And the solution for addicts is, I need a fix. I need a drink. I need this. Yeah. And AA is such a good example of where you can call somebody and say, hey, I'm in a bad spot today, and say, can we have a chat, or can you sit with me as I process these emotions? That is, that is awesome.
Really? Yeah, I can see in your eyes.
No, my mind is spinning right now. I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I even think about that? About that as a coping strategy, because when I get my triggers, I'll reach out to a friend before I think about the AA chapter near me, and there is one. I'll call a friend before I think about calling a sober partner. I'll call my friends, because a lot of them know my personal journey, and I kind of feel like I want to, I don't think I've thought about it in that sense. I think I've always just as a resource. Yeah. I've never really thought about it as a resource for myself,
right?
Not for others. I encourage others to use it, but I don't think I've ever thought about it as a resource for myself. Yeah,
that makes sense. I think it's that firstborn thing.
Yeah, this whole being, you got it, you've got this strong woman syndrome. I'm like, I need to be healed from this so I can learn to be soft a little bit. I was having a conversation with my sister, and she'd shared something with me. And I said, and it was a video about, how as a woman, you don't lift heavy things around the house, let your husband do it, even if you can. And I'm like, this is a lesson I need to learn, because I'll be over there lugging stuff around the house, even though he's right there. And I think that's it, that firstborn thing.
Yeah.
And especially in our, I'd say Africa, not really Kenya, but there's this thing as an African firstborn where you feel like you got to figure it out all by yourself and you don't need help.
especially firstborn Kikuyu. I always say, do not forget that part.
Yes.
Firstborn Kikuyu daughter. Oh my goodness. Like what the...
We carry like the weight of the
Oh my
world
God. Yes.
on our shoulders, and we're supposed to fix everything.
Right. And it really impinges on our own restoration of self. Because really, Wendy, think about it. There's AA, but no. Right?
Oh, my therapist was like, oh, I'll introduce you to the AA chapter. This was my first 3 months of sobriety.
Right.
It's like, I'd like to introduce you. I was like, no, thank you. She's like, why not? I said, just no. For me, it was the notion of standing up in front of people and going like, hi, my name is Wendy and I am an addict. Ooh, ugh. Just thinking about it at that point.
Right.
Now I can say it because I've gone through a lot of this journey, and I realize how hard it is for people, and especially us who were raised being told, don't wash your dirty linen in public. You hide your struggles, you hide your pain. And I personally feel like even our men, not just the women, our men can't process certain emotions because there it is again. Men shouldn't cry, men shouldn't do this, men shouldn't do this. And I'm like, they're human. They have to process these emotions. Yeah. And how do they process? And if they're not processing, what outlets are they using?
I mean, are we even surprised? Like, you know, this, you know, as you were talking about, you know, just even the difficulty of standing up and having others hold space for you. And what I could think about was like shame. Like shame. And the worst thing about shame, it's such an internalized reflection of the relationship we have with ourselves.
Yep.
And it's really predicated on the idea that I'm not enough, I'm not worthy. Kuna kitu mbaya na mimi.
You know, when you hear somebody else say it, it kind of hits a little harder. Because for me, and I think that's the other thing about addiction, right? When we're drinking, it's kukula happy, we're all having fun together. And then when that one person has drunk too much and they start acting up, or, you know, that person, now you start not wanting to hang out with that person. And you're like, oh, you know, so-and-so, when they get drunk, they can't handle their liquor. And we're suddenly shunning this person that we were encouraging to drink. And I think shame is such a big part of addiction because when you start, it's all happy, and we're all drinking, and it's all of this, and you don't want to be called a lightweight.
Oh.
Right? You don't want to be called a lightweight. You don't want to be the one who's not drinking everyone else under the table. When you start battling it, because now it's become a problem, and a lot of our modern alcoholic drinks are created in such a way that they create that craving and that addiction, unlike some of our traditional brews, which were not created for that purpose, right? When we get to the point where I think I have a problem, you start getting shunned, right? And so it becomes a shameful thing. It becomes oh, this person threw up last night. You don't want to drink with them because they do this when they're drunk. You don't want to hang out with them because they do. Or you become the butt of jokes of, yeah, you know, when you go drinking with her, hey, the things you will see. Because now it's a thing for you to be shamed for.
I hadn't thought about the influence of social belonging and sort of this sort of like alcoholic, you know, this experiences where alcohol is like the center of things.
Yep.
I didn't think about that.
And for us, it is a huge part of our experience.
Yeah.
They just completed Euro Cup finals. You're not going to the bar to watch football with no alcohol, right?
Are you serious?
I am, yes. You're not going to watch football under any circumstances without alcohol involved, right? If there are few, but there's nyama choma over there, there's alcohol involved. So you're not doing even the most basic of our social interactions. Sunday after church, when you go to the places with bouncing castles, they're bars. Bouncing castles or whatever, and you start, you know, drinking your nice glass of red wine with your nyama choma at like 2, 3 p.m. in the afternoon, is a part of a lot of our growing up. Kids are on the bouncing castles on the other side while the adults are drinking adult drinks.
Yeah.
And so for us, even the most mundane of social interactions are covered by alcohol. As I've said, until I left this country to go to another country, I never knew you could have a house party without alcohol. Like nil alcohol, like zero alcohol. People are having fun without alcohol, right? And that was new for me. And people are dancing and twerking, to be fair, and having genuine fun without the blame it on the alcohol line.
Man, that must have been a mindfuck, huh?
It was. It was. I was in trouble for a while over there. And they kept looking at me. I'm on my fourth, fifth beer, and they're like, Wendy, slow down. This is not water. Why are you drinking so much? And so my first few years, I was so defensive. I was like, are you buying my alcohol for me? Am I spending your money? Did I ask you to buy my beer for me? I want to drink. But their society and their culture does not revolve around alcohol. And that was so new to me when I first experienced it. Because for me, growing up, everything, whether it's a baptism, it's a, what do you call them? It's a rorashio. It is a child naming ceremony.
Yeah.
It is a baby shower where the mother-to-be is not drinking, but everybody else is.
Yeah.
And I've shared a story where I went to a home of a Kenyan couple who were pastors, and when me being the person who brings a wine, as a I've been invited, the one thing I carry is wine because you never go wrong with wine. And he stopped me at the door, and he said, alcohol is not allowed in my home. Go put it in the car or something. And I was like, okay, your house, your rules. But a bunch of us looked at each other like, so what are we doing all afternoon? And we drank tea, we ate pilau and mandazi, and had a really wonderful time. But as a culture, we've been socialized that alcohol surrounds everything we do, including grief.
You know, it's so, I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened.
Neither do I.
Because I've also lived in a country other than Kenya, and alcohol is not the center of everything. And I don't know. And it's not like they don't have alcohol.
That's it. Like, it's there. It's available. It's freely available.
It's available, but it's not the center. So I ask myself, it is something that's characteristic of us as Kenyans. And if you think about it, when people talk about the Kenyan character, it's always about the idea that, sorry, women, that women can outdrink any man.
It is. I'm not sure that's something we should be proud of, to be fair.
No. But it's saying something about us.
It does.
I just think, and this is not like any research, but I think we have experienced so much trauma as a collective. Well,
because that brings a whole new conversation into it, doesn't it?
Yes.
Now it leads us to having to talk about how trauma, collective trauma, because when you think of our mothers and our grandmothers, what their roles look like and how they got defined and how they stayed in marriages that were unhappy and violent.
And institutions that were violent. I mean, think about it. The formation of Kenya, actually, all African countries, if you think about it, were really built on the embers of violence.
True. Freedom
But
fighters.
right? I mean, like the countries in, what was it, Berlin Conference, right? But then the thing is this, though, if I went to the country that I mentioned, they also came from, the creation, 1890 something, but alcohol is not a thing. So how come them, they don't, and us, we have? What is so special or specific or different or unique about Kenya?
Do you think colonization mattered? That they might have been colonized by a different country and we were colonized by, when I think of the British, we all know that,
what they did.
we all know beer and the whole thing. I wonder if that plays a role into how alcohol came to feature so prominently in our culture and in our history and our evolution as a country.
Now that you're saying it, now that you're mentioning, I'm thinking about this whole idea of the Happy Valley.
You had to go there.
I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yep.
And one of the most successful industries in this country is a beer company.
It is.
Right?
Yes.
It is like one of those earliest industries, 1920, 1921.
Yep. And it's so attached to almost our national heritage. It's our national, it's part of our national heritage that we have these companies that have some of the biggest brands globally.
What?
Not just as a country, but globally.
Globally. Think about it this way. When you think about Kenya, you think about the flag, and then you think about that product.
It just comes natural. It's like almost reflexive that it's associated with that. And as you said earlier, I think one of the reputation Kenyans have is we work very hard, which is good, and then that we can drink anyone under the table.
We're very smart, we're very industrious, and we can drink.
Yep, and we can party with the best of them.
Yes.
That is our reputation globally.
Yes.
So, and that's why I think these conversations to have about addiction are so important, because at the end of the day, color it as you may. And again, we're not knocking on the fact that this industry in Kenya employs a lot of people, because I know that's some of the arguments that people have. It employs a lot of people. We're not saying we want it shut down or whatever. We're not trying to take people back to the places of bootlegging and all of that, historically speaking. But we are saying when it is reducing, when it is affecting productivity, when it is affecting the human condition, which is some of the things we'll be talking about in this season, of things like grief and sexuality and mental health, domestic violence, things that are part and parcel of our communities, of our cultures, and of us as individuals, of parenting, and how all of these are affected or intersect when alcohol is misused, then I think these are important conversations to have, because then the impact is so much larger and so much longer and transgenerational, because it doesn't end with you. Our children see what we do, and it continues to the next generation, and it takes a lot of intentionality to get to the point, like I have, of I don't want to go down the same path my dad had of having to fight or well, technically I am dealing with addiction, but being intentionally saying, I want to be on the other side of this battle. I want to be on the sobriety side of it, as opposed to being on the addiction side of it.
I want to circle back to the question you asked me about, okay, so what are the coping stances? I think what's different now than maybe when you started your journey is that there weren't as many spaces, visible spaces, where, and this is very specific, women, African, Black women, professional women, that we're talking about, this has been my experience with alcohol.
Yep.
And this is why your podcast is incredibly important, and I'm so excited and proud of you. Yay! because this is the thing. Think about the imagery we've always had about folks who are struggling with alcohol use. It's always a man.
Yep.
It's always a man slurring his way on the road, or ameanguka hapo kwa ditch, right?
Yep.
Or a man who's beating his wife. There's never been any sort of idea of functional alcoholism. We also don't talk about the experience of fetal syndrome, right?
So alcohol syndrome, yes.
Yeah,
We
fetal
don't talk
alcohol
about it.
syndrome.
Yep.
We don't talk about that as well. And so why I'm excited, why I think this is different now, is that there are more spaces and more conversations, even if it's just virtual.
Yep.
Although there's that issue of digital divide, but there's a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think it's important that you mentioned the digital divide, because I'm hoping this is only a starting point, and that the conversations can sort of permeate from here into our churches, into our communities, and providing spaces for those who are trying to get out of alcohol, of addiction, And for those who are even just getting to the point of, I think I have a problem, where do I go?
Where do I go?
I'm not even sure I want to quit yet, but I think I just want to examine myself and see
Yeah.
if I have a problem, where do I go and what do I do?
Yeah. I think what this is, your podcast, your conversations, is really, I think it's part of a growing movement of shifting the narrative, right? And I think institutions like churches and mosques and schools can no longer continue with the same narrative when it pertains to alcohol use. So I think this is a great start with your podcast. Yeah.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for making the time to come and talk to us about this. I am hoping that we've covered some basics of grief for you. I say this at the end of every episode. Asking for help, acknowledging that you have a problem is such an important first step. And you don't have to do it alone. Reach out to people around you. There are people who care about you. Today we have learned, like I have learned, that there are AA chapters. All you gotta do is reach out. Help is available. If you're grieving, I am sorry for your loss. Even if your grief is 5 years old or 10 years old or 15 years old and it still feels as raw as it did on day one, I grieve with you. I know how hard it is. Do not feel bad for feeling bad. It's okay. Process your emotions as best as you know how, and if you can't, reach out. Somebody will grab your hand. Don't let pride be the reason you don't get the help you need. All right, now that I'm done with the serious stuff, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for giving us your time. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe so that you can keep wondering and wondering with me. I will see you next time. And remember, one step at a time, we can do this. See ya.